Hello, RANTBOX TV viewers. We are back again once again after 2020 has left us, and we are seemingly still in 2020, though apparently by calendars it's 2021. I'm joined by Nishant Joshi. How are you, man? Are you doing good?
Yeah, I'm doing very well, thanks, John. Happy New Year, I guess. I mean, we're recording this mid-January. I think that's probably too late. Okay, I'll rescind that. Happy New Year.
Indeed. I wanted to talk to you based on the conversation that you had with Luke from Falseheads in a podcast that you guys run, which is called One Conversation. Am I right in the title?
One conversation from the end of the world.
Yes. I like the dramatic pause there. But essentially, there was an aspect.
Sorry, I thought you glitched out there. You just completely froze.
Oh no, I was just
like, your connection's got glitchy, John.
that may indeed happen. But yeah, you were talking in an episode about your experience of being at a gig and being the only brown face at the gig. And I wanted to talk more about that because obviously there's only so much you can get out in the format that you guys have because you're going across many different subjects. It's quite miscellaneous. And yeah, let's start off with one of the strange experiences that I've heard is that you'd actually change your name to something more anglicized when trying to approach promoters about putting on gigs for your band, The Palpitations. Do you want to take us through that a bit?
Yeah, so certainly after a certain point of trying to pitch my band to The Palpitations to different people, and I'm talking about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of emails to lots and lots of different promoters, England and around Europe as well. I realized that I was getting I mean, I understand that my hit rate is going to be relatively low as a musician anyway. It is going to be low. That's fine. I found that it was much lower than what I could even account for. And then I started using just my email address is deliberately n@thepalpitations.live, so that people it can be like sort of maneuvered wherever I need it to be. But after I started using, for example, signing off as N or Neil, for example, I was getting responses saying, "Hey Neil, oh, like your songs. I was like, this is a bit weird. And it was really telling because it's not the first time that it's happened to me in my career. I mean, I didn't think that it would have to happen in music, but it has done. But I think there are lots of studies showing that, for example, applications from people with ethnic sounding names tend to get turned out on at higher rates than white names in Western countries. So it's definitely a problem, and it's not an isolated thing. It's just it seemed like well, I had to experience it, not for the first time in my life, to be honest.
Sure. And again, like, thank you so much for giving us your time, because I mean, the viewers can probably pick up on the fact that you are a dad and you've also got like a medical career and you're in the band, you know. Yeah, like, thank you so much for spending this time with us. Can I ask?
Not at all.
Sorry, what was that?
Not at all. My pleasure. Forgive our listeners if I keep on maneuvering my little baby around a little bit here and there. So,
indeed, I appreciate your multitasking abilities. Can I ask you, do you feel that because of what happened last year in terms of the conversation on race, that arguably you don't necessarily have to affect an anglicized first name anymore? Do you feel that you have that as a bargaining tool because promoters will in some way want to be performative about what it is that they're doing in terms of that conversation? Or do you think that it's mute?
I think it's difficult to predict how people are going to be. Obviously, there's going to be as much competition as there's ever been. And I do think that festivals are probably going to move towards being performative in that sort of way as well, and saying we're going to have a diverse lineup as ever. Although these pledges seem to have been going on for for years, and I'm not sure how much of it has actually filtered down into better visibility. At the same time, it's not like we're an ethnic band or anything like that. We're a rock band, just happen to have a brown person in it, right? So it's not like a major descriptor when it comes to describing our band. There are lots more interesting things than just having a brown person in it. At the same time, I appreciate the importance of visibility. Ultimately, you can't be what you can't see, and so I do think that to have a more equitable society ultimately, and I'm not talking about just music generally, but society as a whole, you have to have tailored tools and tailored resources to societies and parts of communities which may not have, for example, had a musician of Indian origin is playing on stage. I mean, I just haven't seen a musician of Indian origin playing bass in a rock band before. Like I get out in the crowd and I mosh with them, or like I'll set closer. Well, that feels a long time ago, but I mean, we were allowed to be in crowds at all. But yeah, I think ultimately to increase that visibility and to actually show other people that things are possible, and that especially from Asian background, we're typically put into boxes of, oh, you must be a doctor, you must be a lawyer. Okay, fair enough. You got me on one of those, fine. But we can also be multi-talented, have lots of different aspects.
Sure. A little bit of RANTBOX trivia. There is another South Asian descent person who plays bass who's been on the channel. So you may want to check out Primitive Ignorance. So you're not alone.
Yeah, I mean, if I don't, and this is part of a little argument that I had on Twitter with Bobby Friction, who is the BBC Asian Network DJ, of a few months ago, and I was saying, well, and if I don't know that there are other Indian bassists or other Indian guitarists, you can't really be claiming to be putting us on a pedestal or anything like that. So if I don't know, then how's the next person supposed to know if I'm actively looking for these people and I can't see them?
Yeah. I think there's questions for you and for myself as to what networks we were deciding were the works to basically hang out in and learn from and form friendships in. When this whole thing blew up last year, I was far more aware of different promoters who would actually be putting diversity on their actual like to-do lists before everything kicked off. And like, you know, why didn't I know about them before? Why didn't you know about them before? You know?
Exactly, and that's because the game is rigged to some extent. It always has been, and it always will be. All we can do, and all these sorts of conversations can do, is try to dampen the effects for the next generation, really. And I'm lucky, for example, we've got a brilliant manager, Melanie, who takes care of us, and she's very much aware of all these issues, and ultimately we want to be contributing to a society which is equitable. So like I said, developing those custom tools so that communities and societies can actually thrive.
Sure. Did you by any chance check out the book Natives by Akala? I don't know if you've heard of it.
Yes, I bought it for my wife for Christmas. Actually, I haven't read it yet, but I'm a big fan of him. I really like it.
I would definitely recommend it. And when you do, get a chance to read it, let me know, because I definitely want to do a video about it. But it does cover how a lot of his formative experiences, he was able to truly understand what was going on because his mother was trying to, for want of a better word, equip him for what society would tell him he was going to be. So bearing that in mind, kind of throwing it back into something that we spoke about earlier off camera, when you know, first generation immigrants come over here and they want to basically forge a pathway for their sons and daughters, the last thing they're thinking of is that they'll have someone who wants to play bass guitar in a loud rock band. Can you tell me more about your experiences in terms of how you were equipped to deal with racism in the context of, well, the world of music?
So, I mean, I think I was never really brought up with these brown figures in rock music, and I think that was a major driving factor as well. And I think that the people who I speak to now, for example, promoters and fellow bands, they don't see brown people either. And for example, fans who come and see me as well, I can tell sometimes that they're just looking at each other. You know the look, John. You know the look. You know the look. They're just like,
I know the look. I'm prepared to actually be, when I see the look happening, I have my own look back, which is just, everything's fine. What's going on?
Yeah.
Why are you suddenly looking at me?
I mean, for those listeners who don't know the look is when two white people are talking about you, and you know they're not talking about how well you're playing bass or like or the nice shoes that you're wearing. They're talking about something else. I didn't know brown people can play guitar. You know, and it happens. It happens. But I think it's just, again, it boils down to a lack of visibility. I can't say that I had any tools to equip myself with to be equipped for dealing with racism from a music point of view. But I certainly think I was equipped for tools. Like, I was well prepared for society to be racist from a very, very young age.
Wow. Well, I mean, there's so much to pick apart there, because for one thing, you'll get a lot out of natives simply because when you talk about the look, I'm sure there's a part of you that thinks some people aren't going to really understand this. They're going to think I'm basically paranoid. And I've had that thought, and I think every other Black person's had that thought, especially if they work within a medium or entertainment industry, which is predominantly Caucasian. That book, Natives, it's just good to see it in print that someone's actually been able to weave together all the different aspects of empire going wrong and how it lends itself to the diaspora. So that's another good reason to read it. Another thing would be when you are, say, dealing with people at a gig that don't understand you and they don't necessarily know why you're there, it gives them the ability to obviously usurp your actual agency. And we talked about this off camera. I mean, do you think that that's changed because of what happened last year, or?
I certainly think that, well, I hope that people's attitudes will have changed a little bit more. And I think there's just a chronic dehumanization of non-white voices and non-white faces in, like, throughout the world, really. But I think the George Floyd incident and all the subsequent fallout from that brought it really into sharp focus, and the pandemic meant that people couldn't really take their eyes off the problem. Whereas, I mean, on a day-to-day basis, I mean, we would have had, for example, Euro 2020, that would have taken over a lot of headlines. We would have lots of other things taking over. So on a normal day, actually, the sad fact is, George Floyd's death had to happen during a pandemic where people are locked inside, for people to actually take note.
Yeah.
It wasn't the first Black guy to die at the hands of police. It wasn't the first.
Yeah. The world was on pause. We had a moment to actually assess what the world was and then not be able to get away from it, for sure.
Yeah.
Can we give people context in regards to what I mentioned briefly about that incident at a gig that you had? Can you tell us a bit more about it, and then we can extrapolate from that what may or may not take place the next time you are at a gig because of what happened?
Yeah, so I believe it was last February, so February 2020, when myself and my wife went to watch a band called Dry Cleaning, who fantastic band, indie band, really, really original. We absolutely love them, and it was one of those gigs where, I mean, usually I have to drag my wife along to gigs, and she enjoys them, but sometimes she's just like, she gives me her own look, and she's like, okay, well, it's getting late, you know. She gives gives me the yawn and she just starts to, well, whatever, fair enough. And back then she was about 5 months pregnant as well, so she had more of an excuse, to be fair. So dry cleaning was one of those gigs where she actually said, I want to go to this one. So we like made really big plans Saturday night, had a great time. And then, not unusual, like that part of the country, to go to a gig and be the only non-white people there. And as far as I could tell, we were pretty much the only non-white people there. Fine, fair enough. And then there was some, I was in the front row, and there was some people behind me, some young guys who were basically just horse playing and just harassing me basically during the gig, which I was trying to enjoy. So it was, I felt like I didn't really have any agency to kind of cause a fuss. I just didn't want to cause a fuss. I'd say that as my daughter's trying to cause a fuss now. So, yeah.
Oh, hello.
But yeah, but that's why we're doing this. We're doing this so that my daughter ultimately doesn't have to face the same sort of barriers that I've been facing, or the same sort of harassment, so that she can go to a gig and not think, actually, you know what, I have to look out for myself in a way that other people don't. You know?
Yeah. We did liken the idea of people actually saying on your behalf that this shouldn't actually happen. It's very much like how if you see a guy abusing a lady at a gig, that, hey, what are you doing? You know, stop this from happening. Not that she can't stand up for herself, but having other people actually be aware of it, and it being a social norm is something, hopefully, that, you know, will change in regards to, say, being a minority at a gig. You know,
absolutely, and it certainly means that I've this whole episode, well, the whole of the last year, for many different reasons, it certainly made me reflect on my own behaviour just in general, and making sure that we don't just class ourselves as innocent bystanders when we see something bad happen. We have to speak up, and in part that was because I spoke up about, for example, to start off with the PPE issues, and my wife started off talking about issues of pregnant women being exposed to coronavirus as well, when we realised that we couldn't just sit and be innocent bystanders.
Sure. I feel that at this point, because of what we do on RANTBOX TV is kind of more issue driven than personality driven, we've got to that point, I think, in the episode where people who aren't aware of what you've been up to and the level of, for want of a better word, fame you've had, it'd be good for them to know a bit more about what you've actually had to fight against last year, and what kind of results have come out of that. So who are you, Nishant? Tell us everything.
If you just bear with me 1 second.
Yeah, sure, man.
It's becoming sorry.
It's all good. I'm just very happy that you can multitask your way through this very necessary conversation.
So I was one of the first doctors, might have been the first, who actually broke ranks back in early March 2020, and I was working A&E at my hospital, and I knew that what was happening was just going to lead to an absolute disaster, especially in terms of protection for the doctors, for everybody who's working in the NHS as well, so that we weren't protected. I mean, it seems crazy to say now, but we didn't have surgical masks when we were just walking around A&E, and I said, well, if somebody coughs on me, we know that this can be transmitted via coughs. Why are we not being protected when we've seen this happen all over the world? So that brought things into sharp focus, and then I was I gained a level of notoriety for a few weeks, which was quickly overshadowed by my wife protesting outside Downing Street for the safety of pregnant healthcare workers. So since then, I've just been holding her bags at virtual events.
Indeed. And obviously people who are aware of that, who may not know the latest in regards to how that's all turned out. I mean, where are you at the moment with the legal process?
So we completed our case for judicial review a few weeks ago. So that was covered extensively by lots of different media, the BBC and good folk there. So I'm pleased to say that we made some really promising, positive steps towards protecting doctors and all healthcare workers. And particularly, one of the aspects that we were looking at is looking at members of the BAME society and why we are worse affected by certain healthcare outcomes, and particularly BAME healthcare workers, because we know that BAME healthcare workers make up, I think, about 20 or 30% of the NHS workforce. But we know that right now, I think it's between about 50 and 60% of all healthcare workers who have died have been from BAME background. So why is that? And ultimately, we're able to hold a lot of people to account over that. And I recall one meeting where we described the NHS and Public Health England as being institutionally racist. And I still remember the faces of the people who we were speaking to. And I think that the jaws really hit the floor when they heard us say that with such clarity and with such force as well, because they clearly just not been told that before. And if they had read it somewhere before in an opinion piece, it was easier to gloss over. This, in a face-to-face sort of thing, even happening over Zoom, it certainly felt like it was a lot more real than it had been before.
Sure. Was there any pushback when it came to that, for want of a better word, accusation?
No, there wasn't any pushback. I think in reality, what happened was, I think that those institutions, both NHS and Public Health England, are able to understand that this is first-hand lived experience. They can't really deny that, especially when I think by that stage as well. Okay. We had we earned a lot of credit in the bank. We did the hard work. We put our necks out, and we see not every single person who makes a fuss out of things or tries to make change is immediately has somebody put their arm around them and say, you know what, we completely agree with you. You're great. Go on the cover of Vogue. That's it. The whole thing took it was a long and painful process to get to that stage. Just bear with me a second, Dan. Let me. I'm really sorry. I know this is affecting audio and that sort of stuff.
No, it's fine. It's actually not. You know, it's not actually that bad at all. I can hear you quite clearly over the top of things.
I just can't quite figure out what she wants right now.
Well, she's going to want attention, and I can't blame her. Like, fair enough. Oh.
Hey. Yeah. Good mood.
In closing, can you tell us a tiny bit about your band and also about the podcast that you and Luke from False Heads put together on a weekly basis?
Let me just
if you want to tell us a bit about the Palpitations and
so yeah, my band, the Palpitations, we've been going for a good few years now. We released our first EP last year, which was called Feed the Poor, Eat the Rich. It was based on a quote, a French quotation, which went along the lines of, when the poor have nothing left to eat, they will eat the rich. And I think everything which has gone from the last few months has just been like, that's my response to everything from now on. It's just like government PPE corruption, feed the poor, eat the rich. Free school meals, fuck ups, feed the poor, eat the rich. And it just highlights the inequity within our society, everything that's happened in the last year or so. And I keep on using this word equity, inequity. And I realize that not enough people quite grasp the concept and the difference between equity and equality. And so, I mean, just to build on that, because it is basically the theme of what we're discussing always, isn't it, John?
Yeah.
How to make things fairer. And it keeps going to this concept saying, well, in some places in the country, you're going to have you're going to have lots and lots of apple trees, let's say. In there, the fruit will be plentiful, the food will be plentiful, people will be happy. Other places, those apple trees might be, the branches where the apples might be hanging from might be really high. So there'll still be fruit there, but to create equity, how about we find these custom tools to allow people to access those apples? It's not saying that we're going to give one group more apples than the other group. It's actually saying, okay, well, how about this group maybe doesn't need a ladder to get their apples. How about we give a ladder to these guys, right?
Yeah.
So that's really the concept behind everything that I'm trying to fight for, along with my wife as well. I'm pleased to say that, I mean, we talk about you can't be what you can't see. My daughter's got happy now, which is, we talk about you can't be what you can't see. And so that's why I think our campaigning has been so important over the last few months as well. I mean, I mentioned my wife, Meenal, she was the first doctor to be featured on the cover of Vogue a few months ago. She was featured in the same issue as the likes of Marcus Rashford, and she was filmed there in pictured there in her Indian sari when she was, I think, a couple of weeks before she gave birth. So that was a really iconic moment for Indian society and Indian culture as well. And the other thing that's happened recently as well is that we've been honoured by the FA Football Association. So we're part of Team England's 23-man squad. I think it's 24 with the two of us, but we share one shirt officially. and other people who are in that team are people like Joe Wicks and Captain Tom, who really made a great deal of change throughout the pandemic. So to have an Indian doctor couple as part of that squad to bring some mainstream appreciation of what we've gone through, and again, pointing down to that, you can't be what you can't see. I think that's really, really important. But yes, look, you mentioned the band, and yeah, the band has been the one thing that's been getting me through lockdown, and just the knowledge that we're due to meet up very soon as practicable, to be fair, to finish recording our next batch of singles, which are going to be absolutely epic. So we've got 3 more singles on the go, and I'm really, really excited. Really excited. This is the sort of thing where we've got kind of the rough demos through. We've probably done 50% of the recording so far, and between the 4 of us in the band, we just can't stop listening to those demos and what we've done so far, because we've really, really enjoyed the process. And I really think that some of the songs that we've done are just such a good backdrop for this national simmering grief and outrage, which everybody seems to be experiencing. If you're not experiencing grief, you're experiencing outrage, and if you're not experiencing any of those two, then you're in the cabinet, basically.
Well said. I'm really, really happy for you in regards to new material. I'll put a link to your latest EP in the description box. Before we go, if you want to say something very quick about the podcast that you and Luke put together, then we'll let you get back to your daughter, who doesn't want your attention.
I think being a dad when the mums just popped out is definitely one of the great challenges in life, for sure. Not having breasts is a huge disadvantage at this stage. She's singing to herself, at least, which is good. So our podcast is called One Conversation from the End of the World. I started along with my good friend Luke Griffiths from the band False Heads, who endured a really difficult 2020, because that was supposed to be their breakout year, supposed to go to South by Southwest and tour Europe, go over the world, and it was a really devastating, sort of traumatic year, and what should have been a triumphant year, as it was supposed to be for so many throughout the country and so many throughout the world as well. And we always been good mates, and I was being a fan of False Heads as well. And the more we got talking during lockdown, the more we realized that we just thought, well, shouldn't we record one of these? So we talk about things which we try and disagree with as well. Myself and Luke disagree on a lot of stuff, so hopefully that adds some context to the podcast.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Like, I feel so guilty now that the only time you can actually speak to me is when it's really father-daughter time. So I'm going to let you go. I'm hoping that you had a really a good time talking to me, and I'm hoping people really do get a good time out of the conversational subject matter that we've covered. So yeah, thanks for talking to me, man.
Thank you so much for having me, John.
No
and
worries.
Apologies if the audio mixes, it has a few squeals and screams.
It's rock and roll, man. It's all good.